I'd like to take a moment to pause to remember. And I know we have several former board members, community members here to do this as well. Remember former Board of Education member Jean Paxton, who passed away last week. Jean, I had the chance to meet Jean when I first started here in BVSD as I started to do my community sessions. Just what an amazing person, a tireless advocate for public schools in the community. Jean got involved when her kids were in school here in BVSD, and she didn't just volunteer at her kids' school, but she was also part of the District Accountability Committee, which we heard from earlier today. Also as a health room paraprofessional, Broomfield Heights, and also a substitute teacher. To hear folks, hear her describe herself, she called herself the self-proclaimed busybody from Broomfield, I think was what she was lovingly referred to, and was just a fixture at community meetings and a tireless advocate for students in the Broomfield community. I know folks that were close to her are going to speak more about that. She served on our board from 2001 to 2009, but just would like for us to take a moment to remember her outstanding service to this school district. Thank you, board members. Those are my comments for this evening.
Board members, any questions or comments? Nicole?
I'm really excited about this showcase, and I'll keep saying that every time you mention it. One thing that I was thinking about, I'm hearing from the community, people that are excited and are planning on attending. This is going to be great. It's also the first one, which might mean there might be areas to improve upon should we have this year over year over year. And I was wondering, do we have any mechanisms at this point to collect feedback from schools that are participating or from the families of potential students that are participating to continue to build and grow this event year over year?
I love the idea. Let me take that back to the team. I'm pretty sure that they've thought through this, but I wouldn't be able to describe the specifics to you on how we're going to do that, but certainly continuous improvements, the idea, and we hope that this isn't an annual event.
Anyone else? Comments for Rob? I just have two quick comments. One, I want to take this chance again to thank the community for supporting us for New Vista. That was a heavy ask. And to see the excitement there and to see the potential of a school that's actually designed to meet the needs of those students was really exciting. If any of you, besides Lisa and I, ever toured it when it was Baseline Junior High, it still looks like Baseline Junior High, still kind of smells like Baseline Junior High. So I think I just want to say thank you to the community because it's really exciting to see that going. And then, Rob, I just want to thank you because my oldest daughter, some of you may know, is a teacher in Washington. And I was talking to her about how we go out and visit the schools. She's never once seen a school board member. She's never once seen her superintendent. And so I really appreciate, and now she's actually trying to figure out how to do that. So thank you for doing that engagement because I think the two-way communication between the staff and the board and you is really invaluable. So I just want to say thank you for that because I'm not sure that a lot of districts follow that practice, and I think more districts should. So thank you for that. So I think it's time now to move on to our tribute to Jean. And so who wants to go first? I see Jim out there. Do you want to start? Okay, Jenny Belville. And Wendy Fiedler. No.
Oh, yes. I've never been good at that. I was never good on the board, and I'm not good now. So I served on the Boulder Valley School Board from 2009 to 2017, and Jean was my immediate predecessor, and in addition to being a dear friend, she was also my mentor. So I thought I'd take a few minutes to discuss, or to tell you about things that I learned from Jean. And the first thing I learned from Jean was the importance of service. Jean dedicated her entire life to service of others and to our community and our children and the members of her family and her church, and that service is what made her a truly great person. The second thing I learned was you don't have to have a fancy education or a fancy job title to be effective. Jean gave herself a title, the busybody from Broomfield, but what she really did was she showed up and she worked hard and she was patient. She kept at stuff, and that made her effective, and I learned that. And I learned that you should be willing to grapple with difficult issues. Jean never approached, there were a lot of them when she was on the board, and she never came at them from any particular ideology. Instead, she always asked, what is good for kids and what is good for my community? And that was what drove her. And she was always bringing the board back to that as well. And then I learned you should be brave. And once you've decided what Jean was okay with supporting unpopular decisions if she thought they were the right thing to do. And I watched her do that, and I always admired it, and I tried to copy that myself. But she also never sacrificed. I also learned to never sacrifice your personal relationships to political opinions. Jean always thought that people were more important than their opinions or the differences she might have with them, and she was okay with disagreeing with them. And from the very first time I met her, I would watch her as people came up to her and said, I didn't agree with what you said, and I'd watch her listen and absorb that and say, okay, even if I can't agree with you, it's still more important that we maintain our relationship. That may be one of the most important things I learned from her. I also learned something that you're doing now, Rob, which is that the people who work in our schools and educate our children deserve our support. Jean was a great ally, and you can ask anybody who was ever in the schools while she was on the school board. I was just at a luncheon for Broomfield Heights Middle School retirees last week, and several of them said Jean was our greatest supporter. I think Ginger might say the same thing in a minute. And then I also learned it's not the Boulder School District. It is the Boulder Valley School District. and she was emphatic about that, and she was emphatic about bringing the voices of her community, which would have been Broomfield. She loved Broomfield, but also Superior, and then other outlying communities as well. And finally, and Wendy is here to enact this, I also learned bring chocolate.
Bring chocolate.
And Jim actually brought the chocolate tonight, but yes, so Jim is next. Yes.
So thank you, Jim Reed, Erie, Colorado, formerly on the board, and I had the privilege of serving with Jean for 2 years, and she is just so fun to serve with. I maybe build on the comments about the chocolate, and Bill may remember this one too. We were in a meeting, it was budget cuts, so new board member, Jean, experienced board member, the community, nothing brings them out like budget cuts. And the board probably wasn't as nice to each other as Jean would have liked. And so she kind of, as Jean would do, looked at us and said, you know, I think we'd treat each other better if we had chocolate. Kind of broke the tension. I mean, there's multiple meetings for budgets and everything, but we could get back to focusing on the students. I think the amazing thing to me happened 2 weeks later when Ginger and a couple other principals from the Broomfield School showed up with the chocolate, and Jean took the chocolate, passed it out to each of the board members, went to the audience, was passing it around. She couldn't be so more happy, and it did get us through the budget cuts. As a new board member, Jean was like, called me up, and she's like, hey, let's go tour some schools. Just what you guys are talking about now. So she would set them up with the district. We're going through, I don't know that I went through any school where she didn't know everybody. She knew all of the teachers knew her, she knew their kids. And I guess I want to close with my favorite memories. You mentioned Broomfield Heights, but my daughters played basketball, and we were there to practice at Broomfield Heights, and practice gets over. It's about 8:30. Kids go tearing off down the hall, and I'm yelling at them, what are you doing? They're like, we saw Jean over here, we're going to go see her. They caught up to her. They loved her like a grandma. So I think that was all I really wanted to say about Jean. She will be missed. So thank you.
Next, we have Ginger Ramsey.
Good evening, President Gephardt and the board. And Dr. Anderson, I have the honor and pleasure just to share my thoughts about Jean. Yes, she was a busybody. She was one of the first people I met in Broomfield when I was honored to get the position of principal at Broomfield High, and she came and sat down and talked to me and told me what Broomfield was like, and that it was part of Boulder Valley School District, but it wasn't Boulder School District. We heard that a lot. And that relationship continued on. I don't know if all of you know this. Jean raised 10 children, 44 grandchildren, 16 great-grandchildren. And I'll never forget, Wendy and Jenny, I don't know if you remember this, Jean always had a necklace. And to me, it looked like the 10 Commandments. But it wasn't the 10 Commandments, it was a tick mark for every one of her grandchildren. So she had it on both sides. Jean was special to the students at Broomfield High School. She was the person who gave diplomas at graduation. And in our rehearsal, we would have to talk to students and say, please be prepared and be polite because Mrs. Paxton's going to hug you. She hugged every student, and the students loved her. The other thing that she did for many years was that she supervised our after prom. So she would be in our gym from midnight till 5 o'clock in the morning just working with kids. The last memory I have of Jean, and I'm looking at Rob Price back there, she was on the school board and she says, Ginger, I will not retire from the school board until we get air conditioning in Broomfield High School. And we were successful in that. Thank you so much for letting us share our friend Jean Paxton with you tonight.
And then Laura, I think we have one more. We have Lori Albright, who's remote. She says she's ready. If we could. Lori's in Montana, or I am sure she would be here.
Lori, we can't hear you.
Hi, how's
There you
that?
go. Perfect.
Oh, good, okay. Well, gosh, I wish I was there in person to be there to celebrate my good friend Jean Paxton. As Jim said, he and I both served with Jean the first 2 years of our term and the last 2 years of her term. And I think what was really important to me personally was the time that she took to help me understand about being a school board member. She was always available to help me learn the ropes, and she shared her wisdom. She was a wise woman and always had good ideas to share with us. I also remember her in the boardroom of being very welcoming. She welcomed staff and our colleagues on the board and people who were in attendance. I mean, she was interested in people and why we were there and what we had to talk about on the school board. I think she always took her work really seriously. She was always prepared. She always had good questions to clarify what the issues were. And I think most importantly, she talked about what really is important, which is student achievement and making sure that we had healthy and safe environments for people to work in, for staff and teachers, and for kids to learn in, and to use our money wisely. We go to the public, we ask for money, and it's critical that we use that money wisely. She was just a strong supporter of public education. In this time right now of declining enrollment, I would say to the board members who are going to be discussing that issue, that Jean was a trailblazer in that. A board previous to this voted to close elementary schools. That in Boulder, too. It was a very difficult decision. And partly it's because we know that communities are going to be disappointed. And Jean took that really personally. It was really a tough decision for her, but she voted the right way. I remember Jean as being a wonderful and wise woman, a good friend, a solid, informed board member, and a strong advocate for public education and for BVSD. And I'm really going to miss her. Thank you.
So are there any board members? Stacy, did you want to say something? Richard, do you? Okay.
I only met Jean a couple of times, and I don't know if Jenny remembers this, but when I was running for school board, I went to Broomfield Days, and Jenny met me there. And the first person she said is, you have to meet Jean. So we found Jean, and Jean literally was like a fireball. introducing me to everyone, putting my, literature on anywhere that would take it. And she texted me after that, and she was just so kind to me. And I think I only saw her one other time after that, but I will always remember her because she was so kind that day. And I will always appreciate that.
Richard?
There's so many things that one can say about Jean. I used to be on the other side of this board table when Jean was on the board. And many times that we came to the board with issues that concerned equity or families or achievement, the one person that I would always gaze at or look at was Jean, because she always had this look of reassurance and understanding, and would look at you the way that we should be looking at public participants when they come to us. But then she also would follow up individually. She would call me and she would want clarification on what we just presented, et cetera, et cetera. And she was just a very, very compassionate individual. And I'll never forget when we were at the other boardroom, and I can recall that she would sit right around where Kitty would be sitting at. And I would always look at her when I would come and make public participation presentations, but she was very compassionate. Que viva Jean.
Anyone else? I had a prepared comment. I'm just going to read it quickly. Jean passed away on September 4th. She served the board from 2001 to 2009, and she will be missed. She was a tireless advocate for public education, both on and off the board. Even though she'd been off the board for several years, by the time I was elected, her presence continued to be felt. Everybody remembered her with such kindness. If I had a question or needed help, she would always make time, even as busy as she was. If she didn't think you were doing the right thing, she would let you know, but in a kind way. While she was on the board, she received the Heart of Broomfield Award for Education, as well as the McGuffey Award for her service on this board. After she left the board, she continued to advocate for children, serving on the Emerald SAC and the Broomfield Early Childhood Council. We all need to remember that we build on the work of those who came before us. Jean was one of those people, and I am proud to be her legacy. So thank you, everyone, for coming. I think we have our work cut out for us to kind of live in the tradition of Jean Paxton as we go forward, and I think that'll be all for Jean for tonight. May she rest in peace. Oh, and enjoy the chocolate.